To be speaking to you now through the BBC has a very special meaning for me. It means that once again I'm officially a free person. When I was officially unfree, that is to say, when I was under house arrest, it was the BBC that spoke to me. I listened, but that listening also gave me a kind of freedom, the freedom of reaching out to other minds. Of course, it was not the same as a personal exchange, but it was a form of human contact. The freedom to make contact with other human beings with whom you may wish to share your thoughts, your hopes, your laughter, and at times even your anger and indignation is a right that should never be violated. Even though I cannot be with you in person today, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to exercise my right to human contact by sharing with you my thoughts on what freedom means to me and to others across the world who are still in the sad state of what I would call unfreedom. The first autobiography I ever read was, providentially or prophetically, or perhaps both, 7 Years Solitary, by a Hungarian woman who had been in the wrong faction during the Communist Party purges of the early 1950s. At 13 years old, I was fascinated by the determination and ingenuity with which one woman alone was able to keep her mind sharp and her spirit unbroken through the years when her only human contact was with men whose everyday preoccupation was to try to break her. It is one of the most basic needs that those who decide to go into and persevere in the business of dissent have to be prepared to live without. In fact, living without is a huge part of the existence of dissidents. What kind of people deliberately choose to walk the path of deprivation? Max Weber identifies the three qualities of decisive importance for politicians as passion, a sense of responsibility, and a sense of proportion. The first, passion, he interprets as the passionate dedication to a cause. Such a passion is of crucial importance for those who engage in the most dangerous kind of politics, the politics of dissent. Such a passion has to be at the core of each and every person who makes the decision, declared or undeclared, to live in a world apart from the rest of their fellow citizens, a precarious world with its own unwritten rules and regulations, the world of dissidents. There are no external signs by which the strange denizens of this world can be recognized. Come any weekday to the headquarters of the NLD, a modest place with the ramshackle, rough-hewn air of a shelter intended for hardy folk. More than once it has been described as the NLD cowshed. Since this remark is usually made with a sympathetic and often admiring smile, we do not take offense. After all, didn't one of the most influential movements in the world begin in a cowshed? In our shabby, overcrowded office, you will find very ordinary-looking people. That elderly man with poetically unstylish hair is a veteran journalist. He is also a dissident supreme, and when he was released after 20 years in prison, immediately set about writing a book about his harrowing experiences, entitled, Is This a Human Hell? He always wears a prison blue shirt to keep alive the awareness that there are still thousands of prisoners of conscience in Burma. This neat, bespectacled woman with a face free from lines of worry or despair is a doctor who spent 9 years in prison. Since her release 3 years ago, she has been busily involved in the social and humanitarian projects of our party. There are some sweet old ladies in their 80s. They have been coming regularly to our office since 1997. That was one of our tsunami years, when a big wave of repression swept away large members of our democracy activists into jail. At one of our party meetings, I called on the wives and small children and old parents of those who had been taken away to rally to our cause, to show the junta that we will not be defeated, that those of us who remained free would take up the standard of those whose freedom had been curtailed. The sweet old ladies were among the brave who picked up the standard. They are still holding on to it with great tenacity. You will also see in our NLD office women and men whom the Burmese would say were of of a good age. That means they are in their 40s. When they joined the movement for democracy, they were in their 20s, or even still in their late teens, fresh-faced and flashing-eyed, passionate for the cause. Now they are quieter, more mature, and more determined, their passion refined by the trials they have undergone. You do not ask them if they have ever been to prison. You ask them how many times they've been to jail. Then there are young people, but not too young to be strangers to interrogation and incarceration. Their faces are bright with hope, but sober, free from the flush of illusion. They know what they have let themselves in for. They threw down the gauntlet to the future with clear eyes. Their weapons are their faith, their armor is their passion, our passion. What is this passion? What is the cause to which we are so passionately dedicated as to forego the comforts of a conventional existence? Going back to Václav Havel's definition of the basic job of dissidents, we are dedicated to the defense of the right of individuals to a free and truthful life. In other words, our passion is liberty. Passion translates as suffering, and I would contend that in the political context, as in the religious one, it implies suffering by choice, a deliberate decision to grasp the cup that we would rather let pass. It is not a decision made lightly. We do not enjoy suffering. We are not masochists. It is because of the high value we put on the object of our passion that we are able, sometimes in spite of ourselves, to choose suffering. In May 2003, a motorcade of NLD members and supporters accompanying me on a campaign trip to Dipayen, a small town in North Burma, was surrounded and attacked by unknown assailants thought to be operating under the orders of the junta. Nothing has been heard to this day of the fate of the attackers, but we, their victims, were placed under arrest. I was taken to the notorious insane jail and kept alone, but I have to admit, kept rather well, in a small bungalow built apart from the quarters of other prisoners. One morning, while going through my daily set of physical exercises, keeping fit as possible was, in my opinion, one of the first duties of a political prisoner. I found myself thinking, this is not me. I would not have been capable of carrying on calmly like this. I would have been curled up weakly in my bed, worrying my head out over the fate of those who had been at Dipayen with me. How many of them had been severely beaten up? How many of them had been dragged away to I did not know where? How many of them had died? And what was happening to the rest of the NLD? I would have been laid low by anxiety and uncertainty. This was not me here, working out as conscientiously as any keep-fit fanatic. At that time, I had no recollection of Akhmatova's lines. No, this is not me. This is somebody else that suffers. I could never face that and all that happened. It was only much later, back in my own house, but still under arrest, that these words of requiem came back to me. At the moment of remembrance, I felt almost as a physical force the strong bond that linked those of us who had only our inner resources to fall back on when we were most in need of strength and endurance. Poetry is the great unifier that knows no frontiers of space or time. U Win Tin, he of the prison blue shirt, turned to Henley's Invictus to sustain him through the interrogation sessions he had to undergo. This poem had inspired my father and his contemporaries during the independence struggle, as it also seemed to have inspired freedom fighters in other places at other times. Struggle and suffering, the bloody unbowed head, and even death, all for the sake of freedom. What is this freedom? That is our passion. Our most passionate dissidents are not overly concerned with academic theories of freedom. If pressed to explain what the word means to them, they would most likely reel off a list of the concerns nearest to their hearts, such as there won't be any more political prisoners, or there will be freedom of speech and information and association, or we can choose the kind of government we want, or simply and sweepingly, we will be able to do what we want to do. This may all sound naive, perhaps dangerously naive, but such statements reflect the sense of freedom as something concrete that has to be gained through practical work, not just as a concept to be captured through philosophical argument.